You know how it is you're looking to really get something, to have those insights, those aha moments that stick with you, but maybe without feeling like you've just drunk from a fire hose of information?
Right. You want depth, but clarity too.
So exactly. That's what we aim for here. Today, we're diving into an idea that might seem simple on the surface, but holds, I think, a powerful punch: the power of small beginnings.
Hmm.
We've been exploring a piece titled The Power of Small Beginnings, How Faithfulness in the Little Things Honors God. And our goal, really, is to pull out the essential wisdom here.
Yeah, to unpack it a bit.
We want to understand why those first small steps matter so much, and why being faithful in our everyday actions carries such significance, particularly from a spiritual viewpoint. So let's get right into it.
Sounds good. And it's fascinating, isn't it, how our culture often glorifies the grand gesture, the immediate success.
Totally. Big headlines, overnight sensations.
Exactly. Think about it. Media headlines scream about massive achievements.
Hmm.
But this source material offers a compelling counter-narrative, and it's deeply rooted in Scripture.
Yep.
It really makes you think about the contrast between that worldly obsession with big and what Scripture actually emphasizes.
Yeah.
A powerful verse it brings right to the forefront is Zechariah 4:10.
Ah, yeah.
Who dares despise the day of small things?
Okay, that verse, who dares despise the day of small things? It's like a direct challenge to our impatience, isn't it?
It really is.
It suggests that there's inherent value in those initial, seemingly insignificant steps that we might be tempted to just, overlook.
Right. Don't dismiss it.
It's almost saying, hold on, don't discount the starting point.
Precisely. And a key insight from the source right away is this.
Mm,
God seems to value potential just as much as, maybe even more than, immediate performance.
interesting. Potential.
Yeah. Don't let the smallness of the start diminish its worth in your eyes. And this perspective then naturally leads us to another really thought-provoking idea. The concept that all our work, whatever it is, can actually be an act of worship.
Work as worship. Even the stuff that feels totally routine, maybe not particularly glamorous. How does that work?
Well, the piece draws our attention first to Ecclesiastes 9:10. The one that encourages us to do whatever our hand finds to do with all our might.
Okay, yeah. Put your all into it.
Right. Then Colossians 3:23 builds on that, saying, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters.
Ah, okay.
So it's less about the specific task itself, maybe,
Mhm.
and more about the intention, the sincerity we bring to it.
The heart behind it.
Exactly. It's about recognizing who we are ultimately serving in our efforts.
That really reframes things, doesn't it? So the value isn't necessarily in the outward recognition or the applause, but in the inner motivation. But the source also makes an important distinction here, right? It points out that just being busy or working hard doesn't automatically mean you're doing something that honors God.
That's a crucial point, yes.
Mm,
The material stresses that the direction of our effort matters profoundly.
right? Where is it aimed?
Exactly. Hustle for the sake of just selfish gain or, towards ends that don't align with what's good or right. It's not the same as work done in a spirit of service or obedience.
Makes sense.
Romans 6:13 is quoted here. Offer yourselves to God and offer every part of yourself to Him as an instrument of righteousness.
An instrument of righteousness.
It's a call to align our actions, our energy with a higher purpose, not just random effort.
Right. So it's not just about the quantity of effort, but the quality and the ethical direction, you could say. It reminds me of that saying, energy without vision is just busy work.
That's a good way to put it.
And this idea of God valuing the small beginnings, even when things look insignificant from the outside, is powerfully illustrated by that story of rebuilding the temple, isn't it?
Absolutely. The retreat out Jewish people from exile, their efforts to rebuild the temple,
Yeah.
it provides a really vivid picture
Yeah.
because after the grandeur of Solomon's temple, which was legendary,
Right. Huge, magnificent.
their initial attempts must have seemed incredibly modest, maybe even, discouraging to them and certainly to onlookers.
Oh, you can just imagine going from this incredible iconic structure to like laying a few stones in the rubble. It would be so easy to feel like you're not making any real progress at all.
Exactly. Discouraging is probably an understatement. But God's message through Zechariah, again in chapter 4, verse 10, is so relevant here.
Okay, back to that verse.
Yes. He expresses joy at the very start of the work, the laying of the plumb line.
Joy at the start, not just the finish.
Right. The source emphasizes that God's focus wasn't on the immediate scale or the impressive results. compared to the past.
Yeah.
It was on their obedience, their faithfulness, in simply beginning the task he gave them.
Wow.
The attitude of their hearts in starting, that was what truly mattered to him.
That's such an encouraging perspective, especially when we're starting anything new, because those early stages can feel a bit, well, underwhelming sometimes.
Definitely.
But this suggests that the very act of beginning, if it's done in obedience, holds real significance in God's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring this down to earth a bit, the source gives us some really practical examples of what these small beginnings might actually look like in our everyday lives.
Yes, it does. It bridges that gap between this, grand biblical narrative and our personal experiences today.
So what kind of things?
Things like laying the groundwork for a new project at work, or dedicating time, maybe just 15 minutes, to practice a new skill. Reading even just a single verse of scripture.
Okay, even that small.
Yeah. Offering a quiet prayer when you feel overwhelmed. Or making a private decision to act with integrity when maybe no one's watching. These are all highlighted as the kinds of small beginnings that God values. The key here, the source argues, is that the spectacular nature of the immediate outcome isn't God's primary concern at the outset.
It's the obedience.
It's the obedience that motivates the action. Yes.
And this obedience, it's important to note, as the source explains it, isn't about some rigid checklist of rules, is it? It's framed as something much more relational, stemming from love, really.
Precisely. That's a key clarification. The source emphasizes that in a spiritual sense, true obedience flows from our love for God, not from a place of legalism or trying to earn some kind of perfect score.
Right, not just ticking boxes.
Not at all. It points to scriptures like Deuteronomy 11.1, where we're called to love and obey, and John 14.14, where Jesus says pretty directly, if you love me, you will keep my commands.
Okay, the connection is clear.
And James 1.22, urging us to be doers of the word, not just listeners who forget. These all highlight that our love for God is actively expressed through our willingness to obey, even perhaps especially in the small things. And often, as the source notes, that faithful obedience just begins with a simple yes, a willingness to start, to take that first step.
That makes so much sense. It's that initial posture of the heart, isn't it? That willingness to take that first step that seems so crucial. And it brings us back to this recurring theme of perspective, how God's perspective often seems so different from our typical human way of seeing things.
Exactly. We have such a natural tendency to focus on what's visible, don't we?
Yeah, the results, the outward stuff.
On the immediate results, on what others might notice and applaud. But the source powerfully reminds us of that profound truth in 1 Samuel 16.7. Draman looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.
Heart. Yeah.
God's primary focus, it suggests, is on our inner motivations, our sincerity, the spirit in which we approach things. So even when our efforts seem small or maybe go completely unnoticed by the world, the idea is that God sees that quiet faithfulness and he values it deeply. That's a really encouraging thought, isn't it?
It truly is. It really takes away some of the pressure, the pressure of needing to launch with some massive attention-grabbing achievement right out of the gate.
Right.
And it sets the stage beautifully for this next idea, that being faithful in those smaller things can actually pave the way for greater opportunities down the line. It's like building a foundation, maybe brick by faithful brick.
That's a great analogy. Yes. The source touches directly on the concept of stewardship.
Stewardship, okay.
Reminding us that ultimately everything we have, our time, our abilities, our responsibilities, belongs to God in this view. And we are entrusted to manage those resources faithfully.
Right. We're caretakers.
Exactly. And Luke 16.10 is so relevant here, the source points out. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much.
Ah, the classic verse.
Yeah. It's about demonstrating faithfulness, consistency, and intentionality in those smaller, maybe less glamorous areas. That's what builds trust, develops character, and prepares us potentially for greater responsibilities or impact.
So it really circles back. It's not the size of the initial task that ultimately matters most, but the faithfulness we bring to it.
That seems to be the core argument.
And that faithfulness, it seems, doesn't go unseen, at least not by God. Now, as we start to sort of wrap up this deep dive, I'm thinking about everyone listening. People might be in such different situations.
Very true.
Maybe starting a new role at work, trying to learn something completely new, maybe trying to build a better spiritual habit, or even just trying again after a setback. What's the core encouragement here for them based on this source?
I think the central message we can really take away from this material is that God sees that initial effort. He rejoices, as Zechariah said, in that first step of obedience, however small.
Right, the joy in starting.
And he deeply values a heart that chooses faithfulness, regardless of how tiny or insignificant the action might seem to us or anyone else.
Okay.
This source beautifully illustrates that God often works through these seemingly insignificant beginnings, these moments that might feel invisible.
Hidden growth.
Exactly. That simple act of obedience, that quiet moment of seeking him, that very first, maybe tentative step in a new right direction. These can be the seeds of something truly significant in God's bigger plan. Think about a tiny seed planted in the earth, right? The real foundational growth happens underground in hidden places long before anything visible and impressive appears.
That's a great image.
So the encouragement is never underestimate the power and the value of those small beginnings. According to this perspective, that's so often where God does his most profound and powerful work.
That's such a powerful and, I think, hopeful perspective to end on. So the key takeaway seems crystal clear.
Yeah,
Don't despise, don't dismiss those small beginnings.
definitely not.
They hold real significance and are so often the launching pad for meaningful growth and, from this viewpoint, for God's work in our lives and through us.
Well said.
And on that thought, here's maybe something for everyone listening to consider. What's one small step you might be hesitant to take right now? Could be anything. But considering what we've discussed, maybe it's time to see that seemingly minor action in a totally new light as a potentially significant act of purpose and faithfulness just waiting to begin.